going to be talking about recruiting, managing, and collaborating with students, volunteers, and interns in academia. The title of the presentation, Who Are All These People?, is just a quote from my postdoc mentor, Dr. Diamond, when he came into our lab and we had a bunch of interns, volunteers, research assistants running around doing things, and he was, based on kind of previous postdocs, the way that they worked, used to there literally being one person in our entire shared space at a time. So it was kind of a shock to him. So for those of you who don't know me, which is not anybody in this conversation, but for those who may listen to the recording, I'm Guy Weissinger. I'm a nurse at my PhD in nursing. I'm a researcher, and my focus really is on mental health outside of mental health settings. So, you know, kind of recognizing and addressing mental health concerns outside of psychiatric care. And I, think of myself as a nurse first, then a researcher, and then an educator. And each of those roles are really important to me. And so kind of that's important to understanding this talk, I think. So the goals of the talk, I'm going to share my history around working in a structured research environment, and then how that shaped the way that I think and I work, discuss recruitment strategies, frame management around professional development model, and then share recommendations and tips for how I think are good ways to do this work. I do want to put kind of a caveat on this entire talk, is that some of the people that I work with through these models were unpaid. I do think that unpaid internships are a very big problem in academia and in the world at large. That, if at all possible, you should find ways to pay or give meaningful kind of benefits to people who work for you, besides just being able to write on their resume that they worked for you. And a lot of the students that I worked with, because of this, I really tended to work with students who are part of structured internships that their program had, that it was a learning opportunity. So it met the actual federal guidelines of an unpaid internship and what can be paid and what can't be paid. And then some of the other ones were on scholarships for research assistantships and things like that. But that is kind of part of any discussion of this, is there's a lot of equity issues. So I do want to bring that forward at the beginning. So just to talk about my history, my undergrad, I worked in an industrial organizational psychology lab. And I think that, for better or worse, has always kind of stuck with me. We did a lot of research on discrimination, specifically race, ethnicity discrimination, weight discrimination, and gender discrimination in hiring practices and in workforce. That's Dr. Mickey Hebel. She's an industrial organizational psychologist, and she ran a research lab that was described by some people as a pyramid scheme, but that's how she also talked about it, as the pyramid. She was at the top, and she supervised her senior grad students, who were the two people who were kind of furthest in their PhDs. And then she had kind of the new grad students that were supervised by them. And then they supervised undergraduate volunteers and people doing research internships as part of their psych major. That's a picture of me long before I got my beard, as a tiny baby research assistant. And using this, one professor, she had a research group that was, depending on the semester, 30 to 35 people, and producing a lot of really interesting research, using a lot of different methods, qualitative, quantitative, surveys, field work, around discrimination in hiring practices. So we did things that were everything from putting on hats that identified us as being kind of members of certain race or ethnic groups, and then very explicitly, and then going to interviews or try to give our resumes to people. And there were really interesting results around kind of when resumes were accepted and when we got callbacks. So it's a really important experience for me. And this structured environment where each person has a person that they report to above them kind of influenced how I work. I don't have a slide for it, but when I went to Penn Nursing, Dr. Brigitte Bronner organized her lab in a really similar way, where she was at the top, and then she had a research coordinator that acted kind of where the senior grad student role here would be, and then organized kind of her paid research assistants and then her volunteer research assistants below that. And that model was, you know, really helpful in me in getting kind of acclimated to nursing research. So currently I work in the Center for Family Intervention Science here at Drexel, and I developed, in order to do the work that I was doing, a similar, though not exactly the same, model of hierarchy around working with research interns, research assistants. So at the top is Guy Diamond. He is the center director and my postdoc mentor. And then next is me. And then I was supervising a variety of individuals. So a co-op student who was not interested in doing a full-time co-op, and so was doing school part-time and co-op part-time, and was a really good fit for our lab. A graduate research assistant who was not paid, but was given a tuition break for her graduate research assistantship. A post-bac research assistant who had finished their bachelor's and was trying to get experience to apply to a PhD program, and then an epidemiology intern from the School of Public Health who was doing a structured internship where he had to work with large data sets. I and our grad research assistant supervised a group of individuals, so an undergraduate research assistant, and then 8 clinic volunteers, so people who were volunteering to work in our program, and then 6 clinic practicum students who did similar, though not exactly the same roles, but those all worked screening individuals in primary care settings. So with this setup, the group that I had going, we screened 1,800 people across 3 clinics for behavioral health concerns, as well as psychosocial factors related to mental health. We had 6 local poster presentations that were first authored by me or one of our kind of this second level of the co-op students, the grad research assistant, post-bac, or the intern. 4 national poster presentations, similar, 2 manuscripts submitted, and then we assisted our overall center director with 3 R01 equivalent grants. So 1 to PCORI, 1 to NIMH, and 1 to the IES, which is kind of like the NIH for educational research. And then I was able to be the PI and submit 2 different grants for consideration, 2 small grants, so an R03 and a nonprofit foundation grant. And then COVID happened. I know that that's a thing that kind of wrecked a lot of people's plans. For us, it meant that we had to completely disband our clinic screening program, and it really changed our ability to do some of these projects that we were working on. But I'm still working with 3 of our kind of our research assistants. So the undergrad research assistant that was working in the clinics is now working directly with me. Our grad research assistant is still working with me, and our post-bac is still working with me. And since COVID started, we've submitted 3 national poster presentations, 1 podium presentation. We have 2 manuscripts that we're working on, and then we have 3 grants in preparation that we're going to be submitting. So it's allowed, especially because my postdoc is as a research coordinator, so I'm coordinating these research programs that we work on. It's allowed a lot of productivity, and then given the chance for our research assistants to have work where they were getting first authorship on poster presentations, and even one of the manuscripts will be first authored by one of our research assistants because they put in a lot of work and really conceptualized it and have moved it forward. So if you think that, you know, research assistants, these interns might be something that you would be interested in working with, I think, you know, it's important to consider a few things when you approach this. The first is, as I said earlier, that there's a lot of privilege in this, and that if you can, you should pay your research assistants, and you should work to enhance the careers of, you know, traditionally marginalized populations, as well as pay them if, you know, if that's possible. And then, you know, work on supporting the students. But I think that before you do any of these processes, and one thing that I had to do was some self-reflection, and that's reflection on myself, and then also the projects that I work on. And we'll talk through some of these, but I think one of the big things is, what do you need? Like, what do you actually need people to do? What are the tasks that need to get done, versus, you know, what are maybe things that it would be nice to have someone to do, but you're actually fully capable in terms of your time and your expertise doing them. What do I have to offer? So, you know, what are the things that can actually benefit the people that I work with? So money, you know, manuscripts, poster presentations, networking, letters of recommendation. I will say that a lot of the people that I talked to, their reason for wanting to be involved was actually so they could get letters of recommendation or job referral like information, rather than, some of them actually said they'd rather not get paid so they could write it as a volunteer position. I was confused by that, but that's really important and not something that I kind of thought was that critical, but it really was for a lot of students. And then you need to ask yourself, do I enjoy teaching? Part of working with undergrads and new grad students is that you have to be a teacher. You can't just hand them something and say, go. You have to, if not enjoy it, then at least tolerate teaching. And then, do I enjoy mentorship? Do I enjoy coaching people? Do I enjoy helping them to overcome barriers? Is that work something that is meaningful and I feel like I can put the time into it? What do I want my grad lab group to be like? I've worked with professors that want everything to be kind of flat, no hierarchy, everyone just cooperates. And I've worked with ones where it's the pyramid. Everything is, you report up to the next person above you. And you really need to think about, what is this going to be like, rather than just kind of start building it. And then, especially if you want quite a few students, how comfortable am I with structure? Because I think the flat works really well when you have a few people, and then really starts to fall apart when all of a sudden you find yourself with 12 interns and you're trying to manage all of them and have a collaborative, cooperative environment where there's just no time for that. So talking about kind of the critical steps, for us, we had this screening program running and we needed people. I did some shifts in our clinics, but I had a lot of work to do. I could not be sitting in primary care clinics doing all of the screening all day. And so we needed to do recruitment. And one of the big struggles that my predecessor reported and kind of handed to me was that we don't know how to reach out to people. We don't know how to get people involved in this program. We're not getting anyone who inquires. So we managed to recruit 6 people and we've lost 2 in the last month. And that means we're not really able to keep this program up. So when you think about recruitment, about getting people involved in your projects, I think there's 3 things that are critical both for you to understand and for you to communicate. The first is, what do you want? What do you want people to do? What type of person? What training or education level? What do you have to offer? So that's experience, a network, trainings, letters of recommendation, money, and then you need to give this information to the right people. So you can have a perfectly crafted message that sits on a notice board that literally no one ever looks at. And different needs and opportunities will require different recruitment strategies. And this is not something that I was just like, bam, I got this. We really tried a lot of things before we found what works. And a lot of this was talking to people in the community, talking to students, talking to grad students about how do you hear about things? What kind of opportunities are you looking for? What are the things that would make you want to be involved in these programs? So when we had our need for students to conduct behavioral health screenings in primary care clinics, our offers were research experience and clinical experience and intern practicum hours. How it was written as a grant was that, we just didn't have the capacity to pay, but that, these could count as hours for a ton of different kinds of interns and practicums, and then research and clinical experience, which a lot of students need to apply for health science programs. So after a lot of failed attempts, we found that two things really worked well for us. One is we reached out to other universities' public health programs and offered this as a practicum. And we immediately had 36 students email me and say that they were interested. We could not take that number, but they were each able to work about 200 hours a semester. It could not be paid. And so we were able to really kind of fill up. The next semester, it turns out that Temple only does their internships in the fall. And so spring rolled around and we were looking at other things. We contacted some other public health programs, but they had already kind of filled up their internships. So based on talking to one of our co-op student who is a pre-med and really understands the Drexel environment, she's like, if you want to find the people who are interested in research, who need or want clinical experience, and who are kind of hungry for this, go to biology, go to the pre-med kind of basic classes, announce it, and leave your email address. And I thought that this was probably not going to work because I'd already, thought that I'd reached out well to the Drexel students. And I literally went to 2 biology classes before the class started. I made the announcement, what we were looking for, left flyers, put my email address on the board. By the time I got back to my office, which means that they were definitely on their computers in lecture as opposed to paying attention, I had 12 emails. And over the course of that week, I didn't do repeated announcements. I ended up with around 26 students who were interested that we did interviews for and kind of winnowed down. So that was really about finding the appropriate venue to talk to students to get interest. When we were looking for more kind of research assistants who are more traditional research assistants, they're doing assistance with literature reviews, data cleaning, validation. We found that we were really successful posting on our department website. I still get emails once a week for someone who is interested in being a research assistant, and it's not distributed anywhere except our website. When we were kind of trying to ramp up recruitment, we distributed it to listservs, and I was getting quite a few every day. But this passive recruitment, just putting it on the Drexel CFIS website, has given us many fantastic students, some for just, a few months, some for a semester. Over the summer, we've had 2 who worked remotely. So it's been really positive. And, using that same strategy of our advertisements have focused on kind of like, what do we need? What do we have to offer? And then how do we kind of get the information to the right people? And for us, the right people were people who were passionate, who were looking, kind of hungry for it. And so using this almost kind of passive approach means that the people who reach out to us are the people who are already super excited and interested in what we do. So just for people who are kind of continuing on, who are wanting to kind kind of know about these resources. So there's internships programs pretty much in every undergrad and grad major of various kinds. Schools of public health. So I've worked with or supervised students from Drexel, Temple, UPenn, and LaSalle that are required to do public health related internships. And then the schools of health science or majors of health science across these different universities also frequently have those programs. The Drexel co-op program, the 20-hour week can be unpaid, 40 hours a week, you have to pay them. I actually interviewed 3 different students, all of whom were not interested in full-time positions and just were interested in part-time, unpaid for their own life reasons, which very confusing to me, but I ended up giving them gift cards every 2 weeks because I felt like it was still, they were doing great work and needed to be given something. Student employment websites. So Penn keeps one. I'm pretty sure Drexel does as well. They have a lot of information on opportunities for students. You can just post there and let students who are interested reach out to you. Majors all have listservs and interest organizations. So the pre-med organizations might be a really good way for certain people to find people who are interested. And then, as we did, post it on your department, lab, or faculty webpage. Say, like, if you're interested in a research volunteer position, like, reach out to me, here's my email. And, you know, I keep that up even when we're not looking. And I'll say to people, like, we're not looking currently, or, you know, we're going to start looking again in X, and I'll keep your resume on file. And then I just save it to a file. I don't make it a point to kind of give tons of consideration to every single person, but I look at it and I say, is this someone who can meet our needs? And if so, then they get an interview and stuff like that. So for the gift cards to the unpaid co-ops, that was out of my pocket. That was for me. That was because I think that it was just a little, yeah. For the main grant, most grants that we put in, because of some pushes that I've been making, we're really working on getting either work study or part-time research assistants written into the grants. It really doesn't actually take up much percentage of most grants, and really kind of can be a great opportunity for students. So I've been kind of, when I'm working over the budget, say like, oh, we have a few $1,000, we should push in a research assistant part-time for X number of hours a week. You know, if it's just during the academic year, then it's even a lower percentage. Like, you can quickly get at least a little bit of money. And we haven't gotten any of those funded yet just because they're all in review, but that's been kind of my attempt to push that process through our lab. So when you're kind of screening students, I screen everybody. I know a lot of research assistants, they're given referrals by like, oh, it's a child of somebody I know who's interested in a research position. I tell everybody they have to do an interview. It's just, you want to make sure this is someone you can work with. And I use their resumes and then quick phone interviews to save myself time. Not everybody, if I look at their resume or do a phone interview real quick, is going to be worth blocking out time in my schedule for a full in-person interview, tour the lab, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean you need to be unkind. It just means that you are making, sorry, some kind of crash outside. It just means that you're respecting their time and your own. So we had a student who all of their, reached out to us, and all of their history was in biological sciences around like animal models. And they said they wanted to be a vet and were looking for a volunteer position. And that just didn't fit with anything we were doing. We're doing, you know, suicide prevention, mental health screenings. And so, you know, I emailed back and said, you know, I wish you luck. It doesn't seem like this is going to be a great fit for your career goals. You know, I encourage you to look at some of the veterinary schools in the area, the schools of medicine that use animal models that might be a closer fit. I ask questions about current skills, short-term goals and long-term goals, and we'll tie that back in a second. I write these down, like where do you want to go? What do you want to do this year and in your lifetime? And then I ask about availability. Nothing is worse than screening a student, interviewing them, and then them saying, I'm available Tuesday and Thursdays after 6 p.m. And you're like, that is literally something that happened, and why I made sure to put that on, because I'm not working then, and I don't know what exactly they were expecting to do. And I understand, they may not have the professional experience, but ask about availability and what they're willing to work around. So during the initial interview meeting, I speak for the first part because I explain what we do, what our goals are, what the role that they're looking into is, and what we're hoping to accomplish from there. Then I give them a chance to talk. The reason that I start with that is that I want them to understand what they're getting into, because this isn't a competition. It's not that kind of interview. It's, do our goals and work align enough that we can work together? I'm also want to discuss their goals and needs. What are you looking for? Are you thinking of going to grad school? Are you just trying to fill your time because you're bored? Like, what's going on with you? I said skill level, maturity, opportunity for growth. I don't think there's a structured way to do that. You have a conversation, you talk about their work experience, you kind of just get a sense of who they are as a person. If it seems like a good fit, I create a contract. I don't do written contracts, but I lay out the terms very clearly and then make them kind of state them to me so that it's both, this is what we both agree to. And then I establish the schedule that they will work. It seems very kind of formal, but for me that works because everyone's on the same page. There's never a like, I assumed X, you assumed Y. It's like everything was talked about. And then, so you've gotten students, you've managed to get them in the door. And I think the biggest struggle, and my biggest struggle when I was starting with this, is managing students. If you have an employee, there are structures in place for managing them. You can write them up, you can report them to HR, you can ask them to do certain things that they need to do to keep the job. If you're managing a student, you have no way to kind of punish or manage them. You have to make them want to do the work. And so I describe it as, when I'm working with students, I'm thinking about carrots, not sticks. So I can't punish them. I don't really want to, but I can't. So that's off the table. So it's, what do I have to offer them to make this a worthwhile experience for them, that they do the work? I tend to be flexible in the hours and responsibilities. I understand that they have exams. I understand that they probably are going home, or at least won't be easily available during holiday periods. I really try to connect things to their goals, and that I am helping them to learn and mentor them through processes, but that they are not an employee in the traditional sense. And I think that that's critical, because when you try to treat a student as an employee, you quickly realize that besides just firing them, you have no other recourse. It needs to be a different way of approaching this. So, as I said, we'll talk about this. Goal setting is key to management with students. You want to talk to them about, what do they want out of this opportunity? If you're talking to a student and they say, well, I have this semester available, next semester I'm studying abroad or something, but I want to get a first authored manuscript where I do data collection by the end of this quarter. That's not a realistic expectation, but it is one that at least 3 students have brought to me. And so it's a negotiation where you're saying, what are your goals? What are the things that I can do to help you get there? A lot of goals, they're students, they just want to get experience. They just want to know if this is something they'd be interested in. And so those are relatively easy. For students who are more interested in clinical roles, I always say, especially when we're doing our primary care screening program, this is the safest and easiest way to learn to have clinical conversations, because you're using structured kind of readings through, and there's protocols. No matter what happens, there's a protocol for what to do. You literally just get to practice working in a clinical setting without any kind of problems that can come up, because you are in the middle of a doctor's office, and if anything bad happens, you just reach over to the person next to you and are like, something bad is happening, help me. But I really connect the work they do to their goals, and I found that really helps. It helps them to be more responsible. It helps them to be more responsive. If it's for a structured internship, most of them require this, but I always say, like, make a written and detailed plan to accomplish all the goals. So if they're having to do 120 hours for a public health internship, which is one of the students I worked with over the summer, the first kind of structure that she gave me, literally she would finish her 120th hour the last day of the quarter. And that didn't leave any time to be sick, any time to take a vacation, any time for anything to be different or change. And so a big recommendation is to overestimate number of hours and days to make up for the fact that they're going to need flexibility, and they may not think about it now. So, you know, plan for 140 hours, and then if they get to take a few days off at the end, that's better than they have to somehow finish everything in 3 days because they got the flu halfway through. And then always set a date midway through the semester or quarter to discuss how things are going. Not just a regular check-in, but one that is specifically, we are discussing how things are going. I want your feedback. You're going to get mine, very explicitly. I know that in nursing, which 2 of the 3 people here are nurses by training, that this is sometimes seen as a little bit of a simplistic model, but I actually use Patricia Benner's Novice to Expert for thinking about my research assistants. This is a nursing model that the idea was that a novice nurse is a nurse who's stepping in with no professional experience. You don't know what's going on at all. And eventually you will become an expert who has an intuitive grasp of situations. You don't necessarily kind of have to think about what you're doing. You just know what to do automatically. But this is a process. It's a process that people need to be mentored through for it to be a successful, smooth process. So when I'm working with students, I generally think about this. I'm not getting into the proficient and expert, because that's more kind of where many of us are on our research journeys. But most students, they're effectively novices, and they need to be mentored and educated as such. So our experienced students, seniors, maybe some grad students, maybe more beginner, and then we have our competent, so it's some doctoral students, research coordinators who've been working in the jobs for a while. And this helps me to give them support that's matched to their level of development. So when I'm working with a student, most students, they're at a novice level when they first come into a lab. And so similar to how I started doing research, it was all task focused. While I was told, like, what's the reason for this? It was, we have a big stack of things that need to get done. Here's how to do them. Some of that was individual training, and some of that is resources. I'm a big believer in having a stack of YouTube videos, papers, even textbooks that explain how to do something. There's a very nice woman on YouTube that can explain how to do an analysis for outliers on SPSS much better and faster than I can. And if I'm having a student do data cleaning, I say, watch this video, let me know if you have any questions, and then here's the data that we're going to do, here's the variables to run those on. And you want to teach these basic skills because they will be useful. They will be useful for their careers, they will be useful for your research work, but you really want to kind of help them to learn, but keep it focused and simple. So when people start to work in our lab, when they're working on our suicide projects, which are different than our primary care screening projects, I often have them read this paper that's right here on the right. And that's because this is the paper, it's kind of the big paper in the field that set the language. So when people use words, they mean certain things. This is the paper that said, okay, people have been using these words to mean a lot of different things. We're proposing when someone says suicide ideation, this is what they mean. When someone says suicide behaviors, this is what they mean. And that helps them to solidify their idea of what we're talking about as a lab. So always keep those papers or those definitions handy to give out. But really, you want to keep things concrete and use protocols. So this is how you clean the data. This is what you need to do. And recognize that they're not going to be able to contextualize the work that they do. They're just not at that level. So then you have beginners. Those are people who've been involved in research in the past. And you want to kind of move from simple tasks to tasks that are part of projects. So you're not just going to do 100 data entries. You're going to do the data entry, and then you're going to add labels to it. So they're able to move and do multiple tasks within a project. You want to help them develop skills. My biggest find that I loved doing, and it helped so much, is that I had a copy of our data that had not been cleaned or labeled, that I had all of our beginner level students do the process of cleaning it and labeling it. And then we would check it against the final product that had been done previously, so that we could see if there were any issues that they had in that process. It took me maybe 10 minutes because there was a protocol, there was YouTube videos that I had for them, but they learned a really valuable skill. And then we were able to say, like, it seems like you've reached the point that we can have you work on this, with some checking, but less supervision. At this level, you want to focus on why things are done and improving skills, but you're definitely focusing a lot more on why. And these individuals, they're able to assist a lot more on complex tasks. So these are those students who kind of seem to have a grasp of what's going on, but they're unable to effectively prioritize. And this was, again, from my mistakes. It's important. You have to redirect them if you need work to go in a different way. They don't know that when we say, like, this grant is due soon, can you do this, that they may have to stop working on data entry that they were doing on a project that's ongoing. You have to actually help them to prioritize because they just don't understand the context, and that's normal for where they are. So for this stage, I always say be directive. You're still telling them what to do, but you're giving them a chance to practice and grow. And then competent, your education moves away from tasks. They get tasks. What they need is education on why we do things, how we do things, much more. They need coaching, so how to get over problems more than teaching. For this level, these are the students that I really work with a lot. Our master's student was really in this level. I could give her a project, a small project, and then help her to work through the steps, but she was able to take control of either a small project or part of a larger project. And with this, I always take the very firm idea of trust but verify. So you're gonna trust them that they're working on this, but you do want to check the data really quick, look at the charts and make sure that they make sense, because they're still, they're still a student, they're still learning. And so, as the person whose stamp is going out and saying, this is my work, you do want to do a quick verification to make sure that there's not any major errors. So what are the tasks that you give them? For my novice students, I really start with data entry, cleaning, and basic collection. I should say basic, sorry about that. And then sometimes I'll do transcription in pairs where they're both doing a transcription and then they compare it with each other. Recruitment activities, putting up flyers, talking to people about the study. or something that they can do pretty easily, and then office work as needed. For our beginners, they're going to do more complex data collection. So they're really working where they have to actually think while they collect data, making data tables. So there's demographics tables and things like that, basic literature review, consenting for no risk studies. I'm a little cautious probably compared to some people. I think consenting shouldn't be done by someone who doesn't really know what's going on. And so until someone has a good grasp of the project, they shouldn't be doing consent, especially for anything that's beyond a survey. And then developing ideas for poster presentations is something a beginner can really work on. They probably can't write it or run it, but they can come up with the idea and start working through that process. Beginners are great if you're thinking about that pyramid model. They can teach novices tasks. They can't really supervise it and understand normally why, but they can teach them how to do the data entry, how to do transcription, something like that. And then competent, these are the students who can help you with literature reviews, consenting, running statistical analyses with your support, and then portions of manuscript preparation. You're probably gonna have to go back through and edit it, but that's okay. It's a skill for them. And sometimes it's just, you can move things much faster if someone wrote it and then you make it better rather than you having to start it from the ground up. And then our competent research assistants can supervise Novice level individuals in those tasks because they understand more about what's going on. So my final tips, I know that, this is just a kind of brief interview, or brief introduction, but I do think that so much of what you do as a researcher is actually to manage, and we're not often taught or even encouraged to think of ourselves as managers, but we do need to do that because once you have an employee, you're a manager. Once you have a research assistant, you're a manager. So you need to think about what is my relationship with these people and how can I make it where it's beneficial to everyone. I encourage people to put mentorship on your CV. I was told by two of the schools that I interviewed at that was one of the reasons they really liked my CV, because I had a section of research mentorship where I listed students' names and what we worked on together. Students' names and what we worked on together. Maybe that's not something, Debbie probably would know better, that a full professor might put on there, but for looking for your first job, people really liked that. And it was really a kind of a leg up for me. And that was 100%, like, to give credit where credit is due, 100% recommended by my mentor during my PhD program, Dr. Bronner, and something that she did. So, like, credit to her, not something I came up with. Keep realistic expectations for students. They are students. They often make mistakes. If you are the kind of person who needs to be very in control and make sure that you know what happened at every step, maybe having a lot of research assistants is not the best approach for you. So you really just want to be realistic of where they are in their development and what they can do. I do think that we're most effective when we don't take it all on ourselves. So managing, helping other people to do good work is, I think, better and is often less kind of leading to burnout than being very minute and saying I was in the room at every step of this. I think working with other researchers to decrease work and share responsibilities. So Justine actually mentioned this earlier with the co-op that she's working with, that she shared between two professors, and that actually has worked well. Maybe either there's not enough work, or the work, there's some levels of work, but they're not at the right level. And so I've found, I haven't worked in one, but I know people who work in labs where there are professors who their work isn't exactly the same, but they can cross-train people between, and then as the work ebbs and flows, students move their responsibilities between them. And that seems to work really well. So research coordinators and paid RAs can manage and train with your assistants. I think that's critical. Janaea, who was a research coordinator at Penn Nursing, she managed and trained a literal horde of community-based participatory research assistants, and it was great. I mean, at some points there were 35 of us kind of moving through the community, working with local groups, and Dr. Bronner was still doing trainings and working with us, but part of her role was to manage these research assistants. And then, as before with the YouTube videos, but use previously developed materials. You do not have to come up with from the ground up every single time you work with a student, every single time you're teaching a skill. I use, those dummy variable sets. I just make a copy of it and give it to a student with their name on it, because that's better practice than, other things that they can do. I have collections of YouTube videos. I give my textbooks out a lot, like my mixed methods book. I'm like, we're going to be doing this, like read about it. Let me know if you have any questions. At the end of the day, you have the things that you're good at teaching and good at doing, but your research assistants may have to do other things. So knowing good resources can be really valuable to supporting their growth. I'm not great at teaching statistics. That is a thing that I'm not super great at. I'm okay at doing them, but explaining them to a student is not an area that I'm great at. And so there's a few different kind of resources that I use that are people who are professionals at explaining statistics. And that saves me time and is better than what I could do. So really rely on these previously developed materials. So that's really kind of it. I know that, it's just an introduction to the topic, but I think that the students that I work with have actually made my work better, more effective. And then I'm going to stop my share. Like better, more effective, and I've been more productive. And for the students, they've gotten really great things from it, and they've emailed me and told me about it. So 3 of the students that I supervised for their public health internships have gone on to master's programs. 1 is a PA and 2 in public health. We've had 1 person get accepted into a clinical psychology PhD program. And we've had 6 students who were first or second author, listed as being kind of a primary author on a national poster presentation. So it's been really valuable for them, as well as something that's supported my growth and my research. So, it's not easy, but for me, it's been a really valuable way to approach the very daunting task of being a researcher. So we have a few minutes left. If anybody has any questions, I see Deb said, completely support the comment. Yeah, put it on. So that's putting your mentorship activities onto your CV, which is good. I'm glad that that's something other people would recommend.
That was really terrific, Guy. I especially liked the advice on how to calibrate the information, like how to calibrate things to the people that you're recruiting. That novice, beginner, expert thing was really useful. I mean, I think that little chunk of information would be really useful to people who are supervising work study students across the university too. Because when I was supervising work study students, I would frequently be like, I'm not really sure what I can give you.
Yeah.
So that was really useful. Any other questions or comments?
This was helpful. I've actually never been a part of a lab, which is interesting. In my PhD program, my dissertation chair was on her way out. She was getting ready to retire, so she wasn't doing a lot of research. She didn't have any grants, anything like that. So I just worked with her individually. In my first postdoc, it was very untraditional, and there were no labs at all. And it was in a school of medicine too, so it was really different. And right now I'm working with Dr. Jamaat on a community-based program, but I'm the only person there that knows anything about research. Other people are hired to do the work of the project, sort of. So again, it's very individualized work and really different. This was very helpful for me because I often look at people who are in these labs and who, you know, publish 4, 5, 6 papers a year, and I'm like, how do they do that? And now this just makes it a little more clear.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle with like writing. It takes up a lot of time. And I just got my last dissertation paper published. Like, I'm literally like, that's it, I'm done, but probably not. And honestly, for me, students have loved the experience of getting a chance to write. Like they, you know, they're like, I would love to try that. And so for me, and that's been from them, this wasn't me asking them to do things. And so taking the basics that they do, improving it, walking them through it has both improved my writing and also means that I have 3 papers that are moving forward much faster than if I was pushing them the entire time. Part of that is they're doing some of the work, and part of that is we have regular check-ins, which means I need to have done that work by the time we meet. It's like just a scheduling thing of like, oh crap, I'm meeting with this person tomorrow morning. I need to go through and make my changes and edits, or like they need to have a few days beforehand to respond, so I need to do it. But yeah, it's definitely shocking how different your productivity can be in these models. But it's also very different because it's more about kind of supervising the movement, and I definitely don't feel like I own that writing as much, or like it's as personal. But I think there will probably be papers where I'm like, go away, I need to do this because this is like critical to me. And there's going to be some where it's like, oh, that's a good idea, let's work on that together.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if there are no additional questions, thank you, Guy. That was really very informative. Deb, do you have anything you want to turn your mic on and say?
No, I couldn't agree more. It was really amazing, Guy. So thank you. Even as a person who has always had a lab, I still found information that was useful. So thank you so much. It was very, very informative. Great job.
And let's do a round of applause for Guy. This is his final postdoc discussion with us. He's leaving to go to Villanova starting next week.
Yep. Tomorrow's my last day. Bye, everybody.
Yeah, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. That's great.